Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here at the Spartan Rocketry Club, and I'm continuing my build of the Estes Mars Longship. So when last we spoke, or you listened I guess, I had cut the balsa pieces out. Well, now it's time to assemble them because these, by and large, in fact completely, they're all going to be composite fin elements. So they need to get glued together. Before that, we do want to get the burrs off of them, and this is something that you really ought to do like right now, because if you don't, well, you're probably not going to get great glue bindings for some of them, and it's also a whole lot more difficult to take care of this after the fact. So I've already done this for some of them, but for the most part we're going to take the fins and stack them up nicely, and then most of the burrs you can get off by just sanding them over top of a big piece of sandpaper like so. Do be careful, like on this one in particular, because it is fairly thin at the beginning, so don't sand this too aggressively. Once you get it down to this color instead of this color, you're in good shape. This would be burned from the laser, so once you get rid of that black, or dark brown anyway, you should probably be in pretty good shape. So that's great. This one was generally easy. Now the problem here is there's a burr in the curve part. Obviously I can't just sand that. I'm going to try my sanding block on this. If this doesn't work particularly well, and it seems alright, cut yourself a piece of sandpaper and do it more delicately by hand. Again, do be careful because you do not want to break anything here. Note, I'm not sanding the whole length of the thing. I'm just sanding where the burr is. And that's probably going to be good enough. It's a little bit more work. Yeah, there we go. So the burr is clean. The rest of this I'm not going to worry about. It's not, it's dark, it's cut still, but that's all right. This one is a particular pain because you really can't sand any of it meaningfully with sandpaper like this. You really do need the block. I've already gone over it a couple times, so it's pretty much taken care of. I'm not going to bother with the top because there's no burr there, and this one, the burr is here, and there's this little notch sticking out. That's kind of a pain, so you're going to have to go at it like this, because otherwise, if you hold it the other direction, you're not going to get the sandpaper in there. Same deal with the bottom here. There's a little bump sticking out there. That needs, be careful not to bump that, or damage it, I guess more accurately. And, probably needs a little bit more work. I'm actually going to switch the order of the fins because the one in the middle wasn't really getting as much sanding as it needed. That'll do. Alright, so that takes care of this. I can get rid of the sandpaper for the time being. Now it's time to do some gluing. So these are going to get glued together in two separate parts. Well, two separate shapes. So this is, make sure I'm doing this right, but this ought to go together. No, this ought to go, no, that's not it either. Always good to check the instructions. I believe that is right, though. It looks like, it's going to go together like this. Yeah. And they're not quite the same length, but that's okay. Apparently not supposed to be. And I'm just going to get these generally set up so I remember what I'm doing later. And then the long ones are also going to get put together as well. These ones kind of jigsaw together. So they actually go like this, it looks like. So this one is going to be a little bit easier to do. It's going to be a little bit easier to do because it has a flat edge down here. So that's not that bad. All I need is a flat edge on which to work. Well, that's what my ruler here is for. So I'm not going to do all of these. In general, I like to let them sit for quite a while, actually, before I just do them one at a time, I guess is what I'm really trying to say, and let them sit long enough so that they are nice and together. I think these, I can probably do all these at once without any real consequence to that. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue on here. I'm not going to really bother oftentimes, well, you'll see later when I get to actually attaching the fins. I do put 2 layers of glue on and wait a little bit in between them. But this doesn't need to be as strong, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. Now, I am doing this on my cutting board here. My cutting board is, well, it's pretty flat. It has a little bit of debris here, so I'm just going to check over that. The other thing about my cutting board is that while the glue does stick to it, it doesn't stick particularly well. So if you have any other surface, I would break out a piece of wax paper, put down. The problem with that is that the glue sticks to wax paper too, so it just sticks less well to wax paper than it does to, say, like a wooden table or newspaper. So in any event, get this out of the way for a moment. I'm going to use the straight edge of the ruler as my guide here, and I'm going to push down and toward the ruler, and I'm going to hold it like this. Actually, that is not flat because there's probably some kind of debris or something right underneath it. That's better. Anyway, I'm going to push it downwards and I'm going to push it toward the ruler. I'm going to hold it for a little bit, and that should be enough for everything to set up. So about 30 seconds here, and you'll notice I wiped off the excess glue too. I'm going to have to get rid of that before I continue on. Alright, just wipe that off. So this is, it's not set obviously, but I do want to move it because there's going to be glue on the underside, and I don't want it gluing really hard in place. So there's a little seam of glue there that I don't need that on my mat here. I should really clean this at some point in the near future. So that should be fine. I'm just going to double check here that it is as flat as it can be, because this is going to have to get glued on the rocket, and if it's not flat, then, well, that's not going to be great. Now I am going to put something heavy, this is just a glue bottle, on top of this to make sure it is held down flat. That's actually usually what limits me when I'm making these more than anything. It's just the number of fairly heavy objects that I can use as paperweights. But this one doesn't take a lot of space, and I have a bunch of bottles around here that'll probably do the job. If you're making bigger composite fins, then that tends to be a bit more of a problem, because I only have, like, I use this thing of talcum powder for pressing down the big ones, and I only really have one of them. So you make do with what you have. You could certainly just go get like big cans out of the pantry too. That would work just as well. I just prefer not to have to go anywhere and use what resources I actually have literally at hand. Alright. Give this another few seconds, and then we'll move this one and put the last one together, I guess, too. Might as well. And then we'll look at the other ones, because the other ones are going to be harder. And they'll be harder if for no other reason than they have an odd shape and they are not flush against a nice straight edge like I have here for these. Alright, put a bottle of, that's my wood sanding sealer. That seems like a good enough choice. The heavier the better here too. Hopefully not so heavy that it would crush the balsa. I can't imagine having anything that heavy on my desk here, but you know, the goal is to just keep it flat, not to smush anything. Alright, last one. So, as I mentioned, the glue will bond to the pad here a little bit, and it's possible it could bond a little bit to the plastic bottles. That's not really a big concern of mine because wood glue is notoriously bad at bonding to plastic, so that should just come right off. The pad It might be a little bit of a deal, maybe, but I'm not terribly worried about that, to be honest. It should come up pretty well, and if it doesn't, well, don't force it. What else we got? So I'll put my talcum powder down there. Alright, so I can't use the ruler anymore, which is too bad, because that would be quite convenient. But what I do have, and again, this is paper, right? So while you can check for alignment, you don't want to let this set on the paper because you'll just end up gluing a sheet of paper to your fin. But we do have a template to make sure that we have the angles right. So I am going to use that after I have everything nice and set up. Now, it shouldn't be that big of a deal because it is jigsawed, but you can see there's a lot of wobble in there. So I have to make sure we get this right. I think I'm going to end up putting the glue on the little piece here. It's going to be a little bit trickier. Well, we'll just see how it goes, at least on the first one. It doesn't truly matter where you're putting the glue on which piece, but it is hard to get glue into a crack like that smoothly, evenly. So it might be easier to do it on that side. It remains to be seen, right? All right, so I'm going to at least start doing this on the template. And just to see how difficult this is. It doesn't look, it was close but not quite right when I initially put them together. So, this doesn't seem like that big of a challenge. Again, the problem, of course, is that wood glue bonds really well to paper, and I've just set this up on paper. So this might be an ideal place to put down a piece of wax paper over top of this, but wax paper is translucent. You should probably be able to see the lines. But honestly, I have trouble removing this stuff from the wax paper. I usually get some wax paper stuck to it, and that's not really any better. So So I gently coaxed that loose. It seems like it's in pretty good shape there. And I'm just going to put a small bottle on top of that. There is a little bit of glue that's on the template here. I'm going to try to scrape that off as best I can before I do the other. I'm going to do one more on camera, I think. Let's try it on this piece instead and see if that's any better. Like I said, I don't think it really matters very much one way or the other. But, doing it on this side might be a little bit more difficult to figure out where the glue is supposed to go. Alright. Let's get everything lined up. Alright, there we go. And this actually does matter because obviously it's at an angle and we need that angle to be right. Otherwise, when we start gluing these things onto the rocket, it's not going to match up, and that would definitely be a problem. Certainly not one that we want to deal with. The other little fins, if they aren't quite flush on the bottom, that'll be annoying, but not the world's biggest problem. We're going to end up gluing them onto the rocket body anyway, and so there'll be a little bit of leeway with glue, and if we do end up with it not quite fitting flush, we'll just use more glue as to plug the gaps when we're making fillets anyway, so it shouldn't make that much of a difference. This, if we have the angle wrong, well, that's a bigger problem, not as easy to fix. Alright, so I'm going to carefully slide this. There we go. I just double check now that I've moved it that I haven't messed up the angle. Okay, looks pretty good. And on goes my weight. And again, removing the glue here, because I could feel it. That was stickier that time because, in all likelihood, there was a little bit of very, very tacky, thin but very tacky glue on there. Alright, so I'm going to do the last one off camera. No real reason to watch that. It's not terribly exciting. It's no different from the other two. But in any event, so this is basically done, and then we've got more construction coming up next. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.